everybody, today I'm talking about the root cause of poor fat digestion and how to fix it. So if you get pale, greasy stools, if you get a lot of nausea, then you pretty much have poor fat digestion. And also if just after eating a lot of fatty foods, you don't feel very good and you get some funky symptoms. Sometimes people will also get gallstones or gallbladder sludge or have difficulty maintaining their weight or gaining healthy weight if you need to gain weight. They'll also get a pain in their right upper quadrant area where your gallbladder is. Sometimes you'll get dry skin or other digestive issues as well. So yeah, let's get into the root cause of what causes this and how to fix it so you can start digesting fat again and be able to eat more fatty foods. So for the root cause, you are not absorbing fat because you're not digesting it properly and breaking it down into small enough pieces to be able to go from your digestive tract into your bloodstream. So when you eat food, it gets digested in several ways. You chew it, start breaking it down with your mouth. It goes into your stomach acid starts working on it. It goes into your small intestine, and then digestive enzymes and bile and things like that start to break food down thoroughly. So your food has to be broken down into its smallest units. So for fat, that's into individual fatty acids to be able to enter your bloodstream. So with digestion, everything's in the GI tract, but for something to be absorbed into your body and used by your body, it has to go through the gut lining into your bloodstream. Otherwise, it's just going to stay in your GI tract and end up leaving your body in your stools. So what helps fat break down small enough is bile. Bile comes and emulsifies fat, and it separates it into these tiny fatty acids and allows it to be able to absorb through the gut lining into the body, and then you can use the fat. If you do not have enough bile, the fat will be too large of clumps of fat to be able to go through your gut lining and into your body. So note that bile is what actually makes your stools dark brown, so that having those pale stools that are tan or clay colored means that you don't actually have enough bile coming out in your stools. And then also you can see with this, if you're not able to absorb the fat and it's staying in your GI tract and coming out with your stools, you're going to get really greasy stools. So you're not digesting your fat well because you don't have enough bile to digest the fat. So let's talk about what bile is and how that pathway works. So bile is created by your liver and it's stored in your gallbladder. Then when you eat fatty foods or also bitter foods or acidic foods, it triggers your gallbladder to release the stored bile into your GI tract so that it can come and do its job. So this is that pathway. So the liver makes the bile, gallbladder stores it, then when you eat fatty foods and then also bitter or acidic foods, it triggers the bile to come. So then the bile breaks it all down, and in the absence of fiber, about 95% of that bile will be reabsorbed and used again. When you have fiber, it will bind to more of that bile and basically force it to come out in your stools, and it won't get reabsorbed. There are pros and cons to this. One is your liver is a big detoxer, so it can put toxins in the bile, so forcing your body to get rid of old bile and make new bile can help you get rid of toxins. However, if you are getting rid of too much bile and struggling to make enough on your own, then it's going to work against you there. So let's talk about what can interfere with bile. Why do you not have enough bile? So one thing that can happen is you're not eating enough fat, because fat is the main thing that stimulates bile flow, and also animal fat, primarily cholesterol, is the main ingredient that makes bile. So if you don't eat enough cholesterol, your body's not going to be able to make enough bile, and then you won't have enough bile. But also, if you don't stimulate your bile often enough, it's going to sit and it's going to get sludgy, and it can even develop stones. So a big cause of this is toxins that your liver's trying to get rid of can start to develop, I think they calcify, they get things around them, and they get bigger and bulkier and become worse stones that are harder to pass. And anyway, it just sludges up. It's kind of like if you picture a little creek that like barely runs and there's a lot of stagnant water, there's going to be a lot of like algae and funky things, and it's not really going to be something you want to go swimming in or dip your toes in so much. But like a rushing big river after the rains is so clear and the algae is not really building up and it's really nice water. It's similar. The like sitting of the bile makes it get more sludgy and funky. So you need to be stimulating your bile enough, and you need to be eating enough cholesterol to make enough. Now the other thing is there are some things that deplete all your bile, so you want to, or a lot of your bile, so you definitely want to avoid those. So that's going to be like a gallbladder flush will deplete your bile. It will basically, this is a process where you drink a lot of olive oil and specific juices and like Epsom salt, and this is a process where you drink like a bunch of olive oil and specific juices, and I believe you even have Epsom salt to like force your body to purge its bile. And that is, I don't recommend that for most things. It might have some purpose, but it's a very abrupt one, so it can cause stones to get stuck. It's not the best option for stones, and in this case it's definitely not a good option because you're going to purge all your bile when you don't have enough bile. So you don't want to do that. Things like coffee enemas can be great for healing, but they also create a little bile purge. So if your problem is not having enough bile, that's not a good option. If you really need to be doing enemas, then like a water enema is going to be a better choice for you. And one more thing that contributes to bile flow is your stomach acid. So bile helps to neutralize your stomach acid when your food is leaving your stomach and entering your small intestine. Basically, if you have strong stomach acid, it needs more bile to neutralize it. So your food coming out of your stomach will stimulate a stronger bile release and from your gallbladder, and that will really help things flow nicely. So let's now talk about how to increase your bile so you can digest and absorb your fat properly again. So I want to tell a little short story here first, and that is earlier this year I got a really gnarly stomach bug where I was throwing up like, how often? Like 2 or 3 times an hour, and each time was like 5 times within that time, from like 2 in the morning till like 10 in the morning, so for 8 hours. And the first few were very acidic and kind of burned, and then that stopped happening and it started to get very bitter and green, and I realized that I was throwing up my bile. And after this, I was very depleted of bile. I was nauseous and I didn't have much of an appetite, and it was really hard to eat food. So this is a very similar state to somebody that's just chronically not absorbing fat well because they don't have enough bile. So I want to share that because what I did was I very slowly increased my food and animal fat consumption while listening to my body. So if I went to try to eat something and that made me feel like, like a little nauseous and it just wasn't sitting well, I wouldn't push it. But as I was hungry, I would eat more, and I was aware that eating more animal fat was going to be really important for healing. And, slowly that let me build all my bile back up again. I certainly wouldn't do any kind of bile purging things during that time. And that allowed me to build up my bile stores again. And then I was eating normally, eating enough animal fat, stimulating it regularly, and everything was good again. So that is the key that you want to do, is you want to gradually increase your animal fat consumption while listening to your body. Now, obviously, with fat malabsorption, you can get really greasy stools, you can get really nauseous, and sometimes you just really don't feel well eating a lot of fat. So you want to find that sweet spot, but you just have to be aware that you can't do a chronic low-fat diet. It's going to be really harmful to your health, and it's also not going to fix this problem. So you do need to increase your animal fat, even if that is really, really slow. That is how you get out of this. There are other things you can do. You can do things to gently stimulate more of a bile release to help get things flowing again, because it could also be that you have kind of a sludgy or stone-filled bile that needs to get moving again. So things that help that are like citrus, apple cider vinegar, water. If you do that, I recommend 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar to 16 flow ounces of water. So that's 2 cups of water and a pinch of salt in there. Bitter greens can be really helpful, and like a liver detox tea, so something with dandelion root, burdock root, milk thistle, something like that. And you really want to make sure you have those with a meal so that you're stimulating your bile with a meal to help you digest your fat, and then that you're hopefully reabsorbing a lot of that bile at this stage in your journey. You also want to really kind of minimize fiber, because like I mentioned before, fiber binds to bile and forces it out in your stools, and that's fine later when you're making enough bile. But right now, if you're struggling to hold on to enough bile, you do want to minimize that. So some fiber is fine, you don't have to like cut it out completely, but just be aware you don't want to be having like tons of fiber right now, because it could hinder your ability to rebuild your bile stores. So then, I already said this earlier, but just make sure you avoid things like gallbladder flushes, coffee enemas, anything that's going to purge out your bile. And then it's also important to work on any other gut issues or health issues in general that you have simultaneously, especially if you have low stomach acid. So I do have a whole video about low stomach acid, so I'll link that up above and down below. But just remember, everything is connected, so it's important to work on everything at the same time. So just remember, the most important thing here is to gradually increase your animal fat consumption. This will help you to make more bile. It'll also help to stimulate your bile flow so it doesn't get sludgy, or if it does get sludgy, you are cleaning it out. This is like a big rainstorm for the river to clean it out. And then also this is just really what will help you be able to digest your fat properly, absorb it, and then not have this fat malabsorption issue anymore. And if you want to learn more about how to get your digestive system functioning really well, I have a free training on how to heal your gut issues by getting your digestive system to work like a reliable machine. So I will link that down below if you just want to learn more about how to get everything functioning really, really well in your gut and digestive system. And then if you also struggle with digesting protein, I have a whole video about why you don't digest protein properly. So if you're struggling with that, I will leave that linked on the end screen in a second here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.